A single candle flickers in Ashburn Manor's shadowed halls, where Lady Eleanor, a radiant heiress, vanishes on the eve of her engagement. Was she kidnapped, or did she flee a gilded cage for a forbidden love? Hercule Poirot, with his piercing gaze and unyielding mind, uncovers a scorched letter, whispering of a secret lover and a place where roses weep. Who is the mysterious J? Why does the family conceal their truths? As rain cloaks the estate, a blood-stained clue emerges, and Poirot senses a deeper conspiracy. Will he unravel the heart's hidden flame before it's extinguished forever? Chapter 1. The vanishing of Lady Eleanor. The rain fell in a relentless patter against the windows of Ashburn Manor, its rhythm a somber counterpoint to the tension that hung like a fog in the grand drawing-room. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in his tailored suit, stood near a roaring fireplace, his mustache impeccably waxed, his sharp gray eyes scanning the gathered occupants. The air was thick with the scent of polished oak and old money, but beneath it lingered something less tangible, a whiff of deceit. Lord Reginald Ashburn, a man whose broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of his ancestral title, paced before a portrait of his late sister. His face, lined with worry, betrayed a flicker of something Poirot could not yet name: guilt, perhaps, or fear. Beside him stood his wife, Lady Margaret, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles gleamed white. Their son, Cedric, slouched in an armchair, his youthful features marred by a petulant scowl. The household staff hovered at the edges, their eyes darting nervously, as if the very walls might accuse them. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, adjusting his tie with a precise flick. The disappearance of a young lady, and on the eve of such an important announcement. It is, how you say, most irregular. Lord Ashburn halted his pacing. Irregular. It's a damned outrage, Mr. Poirot. It's my niece, Lady Eleanor, is gone vanished, without a trace. Kidnapped, I tell you, by some scoundrel, after her fortune. Poirot raised a manicured hand, his gesture silencing the room as effectively as a gavel. Calm yourself, monsieur. The little gray cells, they require facts, not passions. Tell me, when was Lady Eleanor last seen? Lady Margaret's voice trembled as she spoke. Last night, just after dinner. She retired to her room, saying she needed rest before tomorrow's engagement announcement. We thought nothing of it. She's been distant lately. Distant. Poirot's head tilted like a bird eyeing a curious worm. This is a word that carries much weight. Explain, if you please. Cedric snorted, tossing a lock of dark hair from his eyes. She's been moping about for weeks, always scribbling in that diary of hers or staring out windows like some lovesick poet. Probably ran off with some nobody to spite us all. Cedric. Lady Margaret's tone was sharp, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of agreement. Eleanor is a sensible girl. She wouldn't just leave. Poirot's gaze lingered on Cedric, noting the young man's casual cruelty. And yet, monsieur, she is not here. Let us proceed to her room. The scene of a disappearance. It speaks louder than words. The group ascended the grand staircase, their footsteps muffled by the plush crimson runner. Eleanor's room was a study in elegance, a four-poster bed draped in pale blue silk, a mahogany writing desk, and a window overlooking the rain-soaked gardens. Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his gloved hands touching nothing until his eyes had catalogued every detail. The bed was undisturbed, the pillows pristine. A silver hairbrush lay on the vanity, its bristles holding a few golden strands. The wardrobe stood ajar, revealing gowns that shimmered like captured starlight, iridescent. Poirot murmured, bending to examine the desk. A quill pen rested beside an inkpot, but no paper was in sight. He tapped a finger against his lips, then turned to the maid hovering by the door, a young woman with wide, frightened eyes, named Clara. Mademoiselle Clara, you attended Lady Eleanor last night? Oui. Clara nodded, twisting twisting her apron. Yes, sir. I helped her undress around 9. She seemed quiet, sir. Said she wanted to write a bit before bed. And did you see this writing? A letter, perhaps? No, sir. She kept her diary close. Always locked it with a little key she wore round her neck. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A diary, you say? And where is this diary now? Clara paled. I don't know, sir. It's always on her desk, but Tarot's gaze swept the room again, then settled on the fireplace. A faint wisp of ash caught his eye, barely visible against the blackened grate. He knelt, ignoring the gasps of the family, and retrieved a charred fragment of paper with his tweezers. The ink was smudged, but a single phrase remained legible. My heart cannot, Monjoria, he whispered, rising. This is no kidnapping, Lord Ashburn. Your niece, she has fled of her own accord. Fled. Lord Ashburn's face reddened. Preposterous. Why would she abandon her duty, her family? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. That, monsieur, is what the little gray cells must discover. But first, I require solitude. Leave me, all of you. Reluctantly, the family retreated, their murmurs fading down the hall. Poirot closed the door and began a meticulous search. The room yielded little, at first a hairpin under the rug, a faint scent of lavender, but then, beneath a loose floorboard. Under the desk, he found it, a velvet pouch containing a single letter, sealed with wax and addressed to my dearest J. His fingers traced the elegant script, and he broke the seal with care. The letter was brief, but his words burned with intensity. My dearest J, the stars tonight seem to mock my cage. I cannot bear this farce of an engagement, not when my heart belongs to you. Meet me at the place where the roses weep at midnight tomorrow. If we are to be free, it must be now. Burn this, my love, for our enemies are near. Yours forever, Epoirot. Folded the letter, his mind racing. The place where the roses weep, he mused. A poetic rendezvous, but where? He stepped to the window, gazing at the gardens below. The rain had eased, revealing a rose arbor dripping with dew, its petals scattered like tears. We, perhaps there. But who is this J? He pocketed the letter and continued his search, noting the absence of Eleanor's diary and the key Clara mentioned. The wardrobe offered another clue. A traveling cloak was missing, its hanger askew. She planned her escape, Poirot said softly, but with haste. Something, or someone, spurred her to act. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Clara stood at the door, her face ashen. Mr. Poirot, sir, I remembered something. Last night, I saw a man in the gardens, near the rose arbor. He was tall, with a dark coat, and he was watching the house. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you did not think to mention this before, mademoiselle? I was frightened, sir. I thought it was just a shadow, but now, calm yourself. Describe this man. Clara hesitated. He had a scarf, red it was, and he moved quick-like into the trees. I couldn't see his face. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a wave. The rose, arbor, the letter, the mysterious man-all pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. He descended to the drawing-room where the family awaited. Their faces a gallery of anxiety and suspicion. Mr. Poirot, Lord Ashburn began. Have you found anything? Oui, monsieur. Lady Eleanor has not been taken by force. She has chosen to vanish, perhaps with another. A letter suggests a lover, one she intended to meet in secret. Lady Margaret gasped, clutching her pearls. A lover? Eleanor. She's to marry Lord Haverford. This is scandalous. Cedric smirked. Told you she was trouble. Probably some penniless artist or stable boy. Poirot's gaze pinned Cedric like a specimen. You seem unsurprised, monsieur. Did you know of this? Lover. Cedric shrugged, but his eyes flickered. She was always sneaking off, whispering secrets. Didn't care enough to pry Raymond. And yet, you resent her, Nan. Poirot turned to Lord Ashburn. I must see the rose arbor in the gardens. It may hold answers. The family exchanged glances, but Lord Ashburn nodded. Very well, Cedric. Show him. The rain had stopped, leaving the gardens glistening under a gray sky. The rose arbor was a lattice of thorny vines, their blooms heavy with moisture. Poirot's shoes sank into the damp earth as he examined the ground. A faint imprint caught. His Aja boot, too large for Eleanor, pressed deep into the mud. Nearby, a single rose petal lay crushed, its edge stained with a dark smear. Blood, Cedric muttered, peering over Poirot's shoulder. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone neutral. Or perhaps something less sinisteria, crushed berry, a spill of wine. The laboratory will tell us, straightened, his mind cataloging the clue. The boot print suggested Clara's mysterious man, but its size and depth hinted at deliberation, not flight. As they returned to the manor, Poirot's thoughts churned. Eleanor's letter spoke of love, but also of fear. Our enemies are near. Who were these enemies? Lord Ashburn, guarding his family's honor. Cedric, envious of his cousin's freedom. Or someone else, lurking in the shadows of this gilded cage. In the library, Poirot requested a moment alone with Lord Ashburn. The older man sank into a leather chair, his face weary. Mr. Poirot, I beg you, find her. This is all that remains of my sister's legacy. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. Monsieur, you must be truthful. Was Lady Eleanor unhappy with this engagement to Lord Haverford? Lord Ashburn hesitated, then sighed. She resisted, said her heart wasn't in it, but Haverford's title, his wealth, it's a match to secure her future. And yours, perhaps? Poirot's tone was gentle, but the question stung. Lord Ashburn bristled. I've only ever wanted her happiness. Bean. Then you will not object to my speaking with Lord Haverford. He arrives tomorrow. Yes, for the announcement. That now won't happen, Lord Ashburn said bitterly. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. Alone, he poured a cup of tisane from a silver tray, its steam curling like a question mark. The letter, the boot print, the crushed petal, there were threads in a tapestry of passion and betrayal. Eleanor had fled, but not alone, and not without purpose. Her lover, this Jay, was the key, and the rose arbor was their stage. As night fell, Poirot stood at his window, gazing at the darkened gardens. The rain had returned, softer now, a whisper against the panes. Lady Eleanor, he murmured, you have lit a flame, and Hercule Poirot will find it. The chapter closed with a sense of quiet triumph. Poirot had confirmed Eleanor's voluntary departure, uncovered a secret love, and identified a mysterious figure in the gardens. The stage was set for a deeper dive into the village, where whispers of a stranger awaited. The little gray cells hummed with anticipation, and Poirot sipped his tisane, satisfied that the first piece of the puzzle was in place. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Village da. Morning mist clung to the rolling hills of the English countryside as Hercule Poirot stepped off the rattling bus onto the cobblestone street of Ashburn Village. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery. His polished shoes clicked softly against the stones, and he adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat, his sharp eyes scanning the quaint scene before him. The village, with its thatched cottages and ivy-draped walls, seemed a postcard of pastoral serenity. Yet Poirot knew that beneath such charm often lurked secrets as tangled as the vines themselves. Ashburn Manor loomed on the hill above. Grandeur, a silent overseer of the village's comings and goings. Lady Eleanor's disappearance had stirred a quiet storm, and Poirot, summoned by the Ashburn family's urgent plea, was determined to unravel the truth. The hidden love letter he had found in Eleanor's room, a delicate missive, penned in fervent inks, just as she had fled, not from danger, but from devotion. A lover, perhaps, had drawn her away. But who was he, and why the secrecy? These questions propelled Poirot toward the heart of the village, where whispers were as plentiful as the morning dew. His first destination was the Rose and Thistle, a tea-house at the village square that served as the epicenter of local gossip. Its leaded windows glowed warmly, and the bell above the door chimed as Poirot entered. The interior was cozy, with lace curtains and mismatched china teacups adorning wooden tables. A murmur of conversation hushed momentarily as heads turned to appraise the dapper foreigner with his meticulously waxed mustache and fastidious air. "Good morning, monsieur," greeted Mrs. Agnes Tuttle, the tea-house's proprietress, a stout woman with rosy cheeks and a knowing glint in her eye. "You must be the detective from London, Kay. We've heard you're here about poor Lady Eleanor." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but probing. "Indeed, madame. I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek to understand the circumstances of Mademoiselle Eleanor's departure. Perhaps you, with your keen observation of village life, might assist." Mrs. Tuttle's cheeks flushed with pride at the flattery. She ushered him to a corner table, pouring a steaming cup of Earl Grey. "Oh, I see plenty, Mr. Poirot. This village may look sleepy, but it's got eyes and ears everywhere. Now, about Lady Eleanor." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There's talk she was sweet on a stranger, a dashing sort, not from these parts. It's an artist, they say, with a French name. Julien, was it Julien Moreau, perhaps?" Poirot ventured, recalling a name scribbled in the margin of Eleanor's letter, half hidden by a pressed violet. Mrs. Tuttle's eyes widened. "That's the one. Seen about with her. He was strolling by the river at dusk, bold as brass, holding hands, they were. But mind you, not everyone was pleased about it." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the table, a rhythm of thought. "And who, madame, was displeased?" She hesitated, glancing toward the window as if expecting eavesdroppers. "Well, there's young Tom Rigby, the groundskeeper up at the manor. He's been sweet on Lady Eleanor since they were children. Broke his heart, it did, seeing her with that artist. Got a temper, Tom does. Saw him last week, muttering to himself by the churchyard, looking fit to throttle someone." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind cataloging this new detail. "This Tom Rigby, where might I find him?" "Likely at the manor, tending the hedges," Mrs. Tuttle replied. "But he stops by the blacksmith's forge sometimes to chat with old Mr. Harrow. They're thick as thieves, those two." Thanking her, Poirot sipped his tea, savoring its bergamot notes while his thoughts churned. The village was a tapestry of loyalties and jealousies, and Tom Rigby's name was a bold thread. But first, he wished to test the village's pulse. Further, he paid for his tea, leaving a generous tip, and stepped back into the square, where market stalls were beginning to bustle. At a flower stall bursting with dahlias and roses, Poirot engaged the vendor, a wiry woman named Miss Clara Finch, whose sharp tongue was as renowned as her blooms. "Good day, mademoiselle," he began, selecting a single white rose. "I am told you know all that transpires in Ashburn village. Tell me, what do you know of a certain Julien Moreau?" Clara's eyes narrowed, her hands pausing mid-arrangement. "That artist fellow, he's been about, renting a cottage by the old mill. Keeps to himself, mostly painting away. I saw him with Lady Eleanor once, near the Willow Grove. She was all smiles, hanging on his every word. Not proper, if you ask me, for a lady of her station." "And did others share your disapproval?" Poirot asked, his tone mild, but his gaze piercing. Clara snorted. "Plenty did. Don't take kindly to their own mixing with outsiders. And Tom Rigby, he was livid. I heard him at the pub, saying he'd sort that Frenchman out if he caught him with Eleanor again. Poirot nodded, filing away the groundskeeper's volatility. He purchased the rose, tucking it into his lapel, and continued his stroll, pausing at the village post office. There, Mr. Ernest Poole, a bespectacled postmaster with a penchant for storytelling, galed him with tales of mysterious letters posted late at night, addressed to London, but with no return address. "I reckon they were Lady Eleanor's," Poole confided. "She'd come in herself, looking nervous, posting them quick-like." "Letters to whom, monsieur?" Poirot pressed. Poole shrugged. "Couldn't say, but I saw that artist, Moreau, lingering outside once, as if waiting for her. Shifty, if you ask me." The village was painting a vivid picture, a clandestine romance, a jealous rival, and a family perhaps complicit in Eleanor's secrecy. Poirot's next move was to confront Tom Rigby, whose name surfaced repeatedly like a persistent refrain. He made his way toward Ashburn Manor, but a detour led him past the blacksmith's forge, where the clang of hammer on anvil rang out. Inside, the forge was a cavern of heat and shadow, sparks dancing like fireflies. Mr. Harrow, a burly man with soot-streaked arms, was shaping a horseshoe, while Tom Rigby leaned against a workbench, his face dark with brooding. Poirot's arrival drew their attention, and Tom's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening. "Good day, messieurs," Poirot greeted, his voice smooth as polished marble. "I am Hercule Poirot, investigating the disappearance of Lady Eleanor Ashburn." "I understand, Monsieur Rigby, that you knew her well." Tom's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. "Knew her? Aye, since we were kids. She's too good for the likes of this village or that fancy artist she's been mooning over." Doro tilted his head, studying Tom's flushed face. "This artist, Julien Moreau, you disapprove of him?" "He's trouble," Tom spat. "Comes here with his paints and his charm, turning Eleanor's head. She's meant for better than some penniless drifter. I saw them by the river, whispering like they were plotting something. If he's hurt her, I'll yield what?" "Monsieur," Poirot interjected, his tone sharp yet calm. "Okay, you speak with passion, but passion can cloud the truth. Tell me, where were you the night Lady Eleanor vanished?" Tom's eyes flickered with unease. "I was at the manor, working late. Asked Mr. Harrow, he saw me." Harrow nodded gruffly. Tom was here till nigh on midnight, helping me mend a cartwheel." Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a sign of skepticism, an alibi perhaps too conveniently provided. "And did you see Lady Eleanor that evening, Monsieur Rigby?" Tom hesitated, then shook his head. "Not after supper. She was in her room, far as I know." Poirot's gaze lingered, sensing the groundskeeper's discomfort. "Very well. But if you recall anything at Alou, will inform me. Oui." Tom muttered agreement, and Poirot took his leave, the forge's heat lingering on his skin. Outside, the village seemed to hum with secrets, each conversation a brushstroke in the portrait he was forming. Julien Moreau was the key, a figure, both alluring and elusive, but Tom Rigby's jealousy was a volatile spark that could ignite further revelations. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, Poirot paused by the village green, where children played and a fiddler strummed a wistful tune. He drew the white rose from his lapel, twirling it thoughtfully. The village's charm was undeniable, its cottages aglow with lamplight. But beneath its surface lay a tangle of motives, love, envy, and perhaps betrayal. Julien Moreau's name was on every tongue, and Poirot's mind sketched his image. A man of passion perhaps, but also of secrets. Satisfied with the day's discoveries, Poirot resolved to seek Moreau at his studio the next morning. For now, he returned to the Rose and Thistle, where Mrs. Tuttle offered a scone and a fresh pot of tea. As he savored the buttery pastry, Poirot's thoughts danced like the fiddler's melody, weaving together the threads of gossip, jealousy, and hidden love. The village had spoken, and Hercule Poirot had listened. The mystery of Lady Eleanor was deepening, but he felt the thrill of the chase, certain that the artist held the next piece of the puzzle. Chapter 3. The Artist's Secret. The morning sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills as Hercule Poirot's hired car wound its way through the narrow lanes beyond the village. The quaint charm of the countryside, with its hedgerows and wildflowers, did little to distract him from the puzzle at hand. Lady Eleanor Ashburn's disappearance had taken a new turn with the discovery of her secret lover. Julian Moreau, the artist whispered about in the village tea-house. Poirot's mustache twitched as he considered the implications. A forbidden romance, a vanishing heiress, and a man whose passion for art might conceal darker secrets. Such were the threads he now sought to untangle. The car slowed as it approached a secluded lane, where a modest cottage stood, its stone walls half hidden by ivy. A weathered sign read Moreau's Studio, though the paint was peeling, suggesting neglect or deliberate obscurity. Poirot stepped out, adjusting his immaculate Homburg hat, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The air carried the faint scent of turpentine, mingling with the earthiness of damp grass. Skylight glinted on the cottage's sloped roof, hinting at the artist's need for natural light. Poirot's lips curved slightly. A sanctuary for creation, he murmured, or perhaps for concealment. He knocked sharply on the door, his silver-topped cane tapping the ground as he waited. Answer came. He knocked again, more insistently, and heard a faint clatter from within, followed by hurried footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 20s, his dark hair disheveled and his linen shirt streaked with paint. His eyes, a striking shade of hazel, held a mix of wariness and curiosity as they met Poirot's. "Monsieur Julian Moreau, I presume," Poirot said, his voice precise, yet warm, as if inviting trust. The man hesitated, wiping his hands on a rag. "Whose?" asking Hercule Poirot. "At your service." He offered a slight bow, his eyes never leaving Moreau's face. "I am here regarding Mademoiselle Eleanor Ashburn. May I enter?" Moreau's expression tightened, but he stepped aside, gesturing Poirot into the studio. The interior was a riot of color and chaos. Canvases leaned against every wall, some half-finished, others vibrant with life. Portraits of Eleanor dominated the space, her auburn hair cascading in one, her eyes gleaming with defiance in another. A rickety table held jars of paint, brushes, and a chipped teacup. The air was thick with a smell of oil and linseed, and a single window led in a shaft of light that illuminated a half-painted canvas on an easel. Poirot's gaze swept the room, noting every detail: a crumpled scarf in a corner, a dog-eared book of poetry on a shelf, and a small journal half buried under a pile of sketches. "You are a man of talent, Monsieur Moreau," he said, gesturing to the paintings, "and, it seems, a man of devotion." Moreau crossed his arms, his jaw set. "What do you want, Monsieur Poirot?" "I don't know where Eleanor is, if that's what you're here for." Poirot raised a hand, his expression placating. "Let us proceed with order and method. Yes. I do not accuse, I inquire. You were seen with Mademoiselle Ashburn, and the village speaks of a romance. Tell me, what is the nature of your connection?" Moreau's eyes flickered to a portrait of Eleanor, her face captured in a moment of quiet joy. "We love each other," he said softly, as if the words were a confession. "We planned to leave together, to start a new life. She didn't show up at our meeting place 2 nights ago. I've been out of my mind with worry." Poirot nodded, his face unreadable. "And this meeting place, where was it?" "A cottage by the coast," Moreau said, his voice low. "She was to meet me there after her engagement dinner. But when I arrived, she wasn't there. I waited all night." Moreau's eyes narrowed. and you did not think to inform anyone. Her family, perhaps. Moreau laughed bitterly. Her family. They'd sooner see me dead than with her, especially her uncle, Lord Ashburn. He's a tyrant, Monsieur Poirot. He controls her fortune, her life, everything. Poirot tilted his head, his mind cataloging the artist's words. A tyrant, you say, and yet you planned to defy him. That is bold, monsieur, or perhaps reckless. He stepped closer to a canvas, studying the delicate brushstrokes that captured Eleanor's likeness. Tell me, did Mademoiselle Ashburn fear her uncle? She did, Moreau admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. She said he'd do anything to keep her under his thumb. That's why we had to be secret about everything. Poirot turned, his gaze piercing. And did she speak of anyone else? A rival, perhaps? Or another who might wish her harm? Moreau shook his head, but his hesitation betrayed him. Poirot's mustache twitched again. Come, monsieur. The little gray cells, they do not rest. You know something more. Moreau sighed, running a hand through his hair. There was a groundskeeper at the manor, Thomas Grieve. He was always watching her, always lurking. Eleanor said he made her uneasy, but she didn't think he'd act on it. I told her to be careful. Poirot nodded, filing the name away. In this cottage by the coast, describe it to me. It's a small place, half a mile from the cliffs. No one goes there. It's got a red door, a chimney that leans a bit. We found it months ago, a place to be alone. Moreau's voice cracked, and he turned away, staring at the canvas on the easel. Poirot moved to the table, his gloved fingers brushing the pile of sketches. The journal caught his eye, its leather cover stained with paint. May I? He asked. Already lifting it, Moreau started forward. That's private, but of course, Poirot said smoothly, and yet, in matters of disappearance, privacy must sometimes yield to truth. He opened the journal, flipping through pages filled with sketches of Eleanor, poetry fragments, and hurried notes. One page stopped him, a torn sheet with a single line in Eleanor's elegant hand. Meet me at the red door. Midnight, the 12th. Trust no one. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The 12th? That was 2 nights ago. Yes. Moreau nodded, his face pale. That's her writing. She left that for me, but she never came. Poirot closed the journal, tucking it under his arm. This I must borrow. It may hold answers. He stepped toward the door, then paused, turning back to Moreau. One final question, monsieur. Did Mademoiselle Ashburn ever speak of a betrayal? Someone close who might turn against her? Poirot's brow furrowed. She said once that she couldn't trust anyone in that house. Not her uncle, not her cousins, not even the staff. She felt trapped. Poirot inclined his head. Marcy, Monsieur Moreau, you have been most helpful. I shall return your journal when my investigation permits. As he stepped outside, the cool air brushed his face, and he felt a pang of sympathy for the young artist whose love seemed as vivid as his paintings, yet fraught with peril. The coastal cottage beckoned, a new thread in the tapestry of this mystery. Poirot climbed into the waiting car, his mind alight with possibilities. Eleanor had planned to flee, but something or someone had stopped her. The groundskeeper, Thomas Grieve, loomed as a shadow in his thoughts, as did Lord Ashburn's iron grip on his niece's life. The car rumbled toward the coast, the landscape shifting from lush green to rugged cliffs. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly on the journal, his thoughts racing. The red door, the midnight meeting, cryptic warning, each piece fit into a larger puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. He leaned back, closing his eyes, letting the little gray cells work their magic. The journey to the coast took an hour, and, as the car crested a hill, the sea came into view, a vast expanse of gray under a clouded sky. To quote, the driver slowed near. A cluster of windswept trees pointing to a narrow path. "The cottage is down there, sir. Red door, like you said." Poirot descended the path, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the sandy earth. The cottage appeared, its red door faded, but unmistakable, the chimney tilting as Moreau had described. The windows were shuttered, and an eerie stillness hung over the place. Poirot approached, his cane tapping rhythmically, and tested the door. It was unlocked, creaking as it swung inward. The interior was sparse, a single room with a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a cold hearth. Dust motes danced in the slanted light, and Poirot's sharp eyes caught a glint under the table. He knelt, retrieving a small silver locket, its clasp broken. Beside was a miniature portrait of Eleanor, her face serene yet wistful. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, slipping the locket into his pocket. "What secrets do you hide, mademoiselle?" He searched further, finding a crumpled piece of paper wedged behind the hearth. Unfolding it, he read a hurried scrawl. "J. He knows. I can't stay. Forgive me." The handwriting matched the journal's note, confirming Eleanor's presence herein. Her fear. Poirot's gaze swept the room again, landing on a faint stain on the floorboards, barely visible in the dim light. He crouched, touching it with a gloved finger. It was dry, but the faint reddish hue suggested blood. Not enough for a fatal wound, but enough to quicken his pulse. A noise outside, a rustling in the underbrush, snapped him to attention. He rose, moving silently to the window and peering through a crack in the shutter. A figure moved in the distance, cloaked and hooded, too far to identify. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. "So, the game continues," he whispered. He stepped outside, scanning the horizon, but the figure had vanished. The wind carried a faint tinge of salt and seaweed, and Poirot's mind churned. The locket, the note, the blood, each pointed to a struggle, perhaps a betrayal. Eleanor had come here, but someone had followed. The question was, who and why? Returning to the car, Poirot instructed the driver to take him to the nearest inn. As the vehicle wound back through the cliffs, he opened Moreau's journal again, flipping to a page he'd overlooked. Tucked between 2 sketches was a pressed flower, forget-me-not, and beneath it a single word in Eleanor's hand, betrayed. Poirot's heart sank, not from the word itself, but from the weight of its implication. Love, he knew, could inspire great courage, but also great treachery. At the inn, a cozy establishment called the Salty Gull, Poirot secured a room and settled at a corner table with a cup of tisane. The warmth of the drink soothed him as he spread the journal's pages before him, piecing together the lover's plan. Eleanor and Moreau had dreamed of escape, but her uncle's shadow loomed large, and the groundskeeper's jealousy added another layer of danger. The coastal cottage held clues to a struggle, but Eleanor's fate remained elusive. Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes distant. The artist's passion, the heiress's fear, the uncle's control swirled in his mind like colors on a canvas. He felt a quiet sympathy for Eleanor and Moreau, their love caught in a web of deceit. Yet sympathy would not solve the case. Only the meticulous application of order and method would reveal the truth. As the inn's fire crackled, Poirot closed the journal, his resolve firm. The next step was clear. The cottage held more secrets, and the figure in the cloak might hold the key. Tomorrow he would return, armed with new questions and the unyielding determination of Hercule Poirot. For now, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. Tisane's warmth, a small comfort against the chill of a mystery yet unsolved. Chapter 4. Shadows by the sea. The wind howled like a mournful chorus as Hercule Poirot stepped from the chauffeured car onto the rugged cliffs of the Cornish coast. The sea churned below, its waves crashing against jagged rocks with a ferocity that seemed to echo the turmoil of the case at hand. The air was thick with salt and the promise of secrets, and Poirot, his neatly pressed coat flapping in the gusts, adjusted his hat with a precise flick of his wrist. The remote cottage, perched precariously on the cliff's edge, loomed ahead, a squat, weathered structure that seemed to crouch against the storm's wrath. This was the place Poirot knew, where the threads of Lady Eleanor Ashburn's disappearance might begin to unravel. The lead had come from Julian Moreau's paint-splattered journal, discovered in his cluttered studio. A cryptic note, scrawled in Eleanor's elegant hand, had pointed to this windswept cottage as their intended rendezvous. "The sea will guard our love," it read, a romantic flourish that Poirot found both poignant and suspicious. Had Eleanor reached this haven, or had something or someone intervened? The little Belgian detective's mustache twitched as he surveyed the scene. His gray cells already worry with possibilities. The driver, a taciturn man named Higgs, lingered by the car, his cap pulled low against the wind. "This place gives me the shivers, sir," he muttered, casting a wary glance at the cottage. "Folks say it's cursed. Smugglers used it back in the day. Strange noises at night, they say." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Cursed, you say, mon ami? It is not curses that concern Hercule Poirot, but the truths that hide in shadows. You will wait here. We—" Higgs nodded reluctantly, and Poirot approached the cottage, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel path. The door, warped by years of sea air, creaked ominously as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint scent of mildew and something sharper fear, perhaps. The single room was sparsely furnished. A rickety table, a sagging chair, and a narrow bed with a threadbare blanket. But it was the signs of disturbance that caught Poirot's eye, shattered glass on the floor, a chair overturned, and, most telling, a woman's scarf, pale blue and torn, draped across the table like a discarded clue. He knelt beside the scarf, his gloved fingers tracing its frayed edges. "Silk," he murmured, "and of fine quality. This is no fisherman's rag." His gaze shifted to the floor, where a faint smear of dirt suggested recent footsteps. But it was the blood-stained handkerchief crumpled in a corner that made his heart quicken. He retrieved it with a handkerchief of his own, holding it to the dim light filtering through the grimy window. The stain was dark, almost black, but fresh enough to suggest recent violence. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "what drama has unfolded here?" Poirot's inspection was interrupted by a sharp sound, pebbles skittering across the cliff outside. He froze, his senses alert. The wind, perhaps, or something more deliberate. He stepped to the window, peering through the salt-crusted glass. The cliffs were empty, save for the gulls wheeling overhead, their cries blending with the sea's roar. Yet Poirot's intuition, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him he was not alone. He moved swiftly to the door, his cane tapping lightly on the floorboards. Outside, the wind whipped his coat, but his eyes scanned the horizon. A flicker of movement behind a boulder. No more than a shadow. "Monsieur or Madame," he called, his voice carrying over the gale. "It is most impolite to lurk. Show yourself, s'il vous plaît." Silence answered, broken only by the crash of waves. Poirot's lips pursed. He was not one to chase shadows, but neither would he ignore them. He returned to the cottage, his mind cataloging every detail. The scarf, the handkerchief, the overturned chair. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. He needed more, something to anchor the chaos. His search led him to a small fireplace, its hearth cold and choked with ash. Kneeling, he sifted through the debris, his fingers brushing against a scrap of paper, singed but legible. It was a fragment of a letter written in a hurried scrawl. "Cannot trust him. He knows too much. Meet me at dusk." The words were Eleanor's unmistakable from the note in Morrow's journal. But who was he, and what did he know? Poirot pocketed the fragment, his thoughts racing. The letter suggested betrayal, a lover's trust broken. Had Eleanor come here to meet Moreau, only to find danger instead? Or was the danger itself the reason for her flight? He straightened, brushing ash from his gloves, when a faint creak from the floorboards behind him made him spin. A figure stood in the doorway, a grizzled fisherman, his face weathered as the cliffs themselves. His oilskin coat glistened with spray, and his eyes, sharp and wary, fixed on Poirot. "What's a fancy gent like you doing in a place like this?" he growled, his voice rough as gravel. Poirot smiled, unruffled. "Monsieur, I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek answers. You, I presume, are a man of the sea. Perhaps, you have seen something of interest here." The fisherman's eyes narrowed. "Name's Caleb. I fish these waters. Ain't my business to poke into cottages, but I saw something last night. A cloaked figure, running like the devil was after M. Headed toward the village. They did." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A cloaked figure, you say? Man or woman?" "Couldn't tell. Too dark, too quick. But they weren't alone. Heard voices, angry ones, before the figure bolted." "Voices," Poirot repeated, his mind seizing the detail. "Okay. And this cloaked figure, did they carry anything? Okay. A bag, perhaps, or a weapon?" Caleb shrugged. "Didn't see. But I found this near the path." He reached into his coat and produced a small silver locket, its chain broken. "Thought it might be worth something." Poirot took the locket, his fingers deftly opening it. Inside was a miniature portrait of Eleanor, her face radiant with youth and hope. The other half held a lock of dark hair. Morals. "Perhaps this is most helpful, Monsieur Caleb. You will allow me to keep it." Caleb hesitated, then nodded. "Keep it, but you watch yourself, gent. This coast don't take kindly to strangers." Poirot inclined his head. "I am most grateful, and fear not, I am no stranger to danger." As Caleb trudged back to his boat, Poirot examined the locket, his mind weaving connections. The cloaked figure, the angry voices, the signs of struggle all pointed to a confrontation. But who had been here with Eleanor? And where was she now? The blood-stained handkerchief loomed large in his thoughts, a grim reminder that time was not on his side. He returned to the cottage, determined to uncover more. Beneath the bed, he found a small wooden box, its lock broken. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded tightly. Unfolding it, he found a coded message, written in a simple substitution cipher. QEBPRFIBTFIIE Bix HLT Prop. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A challenge. He produced a pencil and paper from his pocket, his mind racing through the alphabet. Within minutes, he had cracked it. "The dusky will heart go undying." The message was poetic but vague, its meaning obscured. Was dusky will a reference to dusk, the time of the rendezvous? Or something more personal, a code between lovers? Poirot tucked the paper away, his thoughts interrupted by a sudden shout from outside. "Higgs," he called, stepping onto the cliff. The driver was pointing frantically toward the cottage's roof, where a thin tendril of smoke curled into the sky. Fire. Poirot's heart raced as he realized someone was trying to destroy the evidence. He sprinted back inside, heedless of the danger, and grabbed the scarf's handkerchief and coded message, shoving them into his coat. The smoke thickened, stinging in his eyes, but he spotted the Sorza pile of rags in the corner, doused with oil and set alight, with the strength belying his small frame. Poirot dragged the rags to the door and stamped out the flames, coughing as the wind dispersed the smoke. The cottage was safe, but the attempt on it confirmed his suspicions. Someone wanted the truth buried. Kay scanned the cliffs again, but the arsonist had vanished. leaving only the sea's relentless roar. Exhausted but triumphant, Poirot made his way to the nearby village into a quaint establishment called the Salty Gull. The innkeeper, a plump woman with a warm smile, greeted him with a steaming pot of tea. "Rough day, sir?" she asked, noting his disheveled appearance. "Indeed," Madame Poirot replied, accepting the tea with gratitude. "But the day is not yet done, and neither is Hercule Poirot." He settled into a corner booth, spreading his clues before him: the scarf, the handkerchief, the locket, the coded message, and the singed letter fragment. Each told a story, but together they formed a tapestry of deception. The cloaked figure, the angry voices, the fire all suggested a conspiracy deeper than a simple elopement. Eleanor had come here, perhaps with Moreau, but someone had intervened. Was it Lord Ashburn, desperate to control her fortune? Or another player, hidden in the shadows? As the fire crackled in the inn's hearth, Poirot sipped his tea, his mind alight with theories. The blood-stained handkerchief worried him most. Was it Eleanor's blood, or a clever ruse? The coded message hinted at a plan, but its ambiguity frustrated him. And the cloaked figure, who were they, and why had they fled? He closed his eyes, letting the pieces shift in his mind like a kaleidoscope, searching for the pattern that would bring clarity. A sudden thought struck him. The locket's portrait of Eleanor was recent, but the lock of hair inside was dark, almost black, while Eleanor's hair was a soft auburn. He opened the locket again, examining the hair closely. It was coarser than he'd expected, not human, but horsehair. Strange keepsake, unless it held a symbolic meaning. He recalled the groundskeeper from the village, a man with a grudge against Moreau. Could the hair be a clue to his involvement, a token of some rural superstition? Poirot's reverie was broken by the innkeeper's voice. "Sir, there's a lad outside, says he's got a message for you." Poirot rose, his cane tapping as he followed her to the door. A boy, no older than 12, stood shivering in the dusk, clutching a folded note. "Found this on the path, sir," he said, thrusting it into Poirot's hand. "Thought it might be important." The note was written in a different hand, hurried and uneven. "Leave the cottage alone, or you'll regret it." Poirot's lips curled into a wry smile. A threat so soon. It only confirmed he was on the right path. He tipped the boy generously and returned to his booth, the note joining his collection of clues. As night fell, the inn grew quiet, save for the distant crash of waves. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, his mind a whirlwind of deduction. The cottage had been a stage for a drama: love, betrayal, perhaps violence. Eleanor had been here, but she was gone, her fate tied to the cloaked figure and the voices in the night. The fire, the threat, the coded message, all were attempts to obscure the truth. But Hercule Poirot was not so easily deterred. He finished his tea, the warmth steadying his resolve. Tomorrow he would return to Ashburn Manor, confront Lord Ashburn, and unravel the next thread in this tangled web. For now, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The cottage had yielded its secrets, and though the mystery deepened, Poirot felt the thrill of the chase. The sea might guard its secrets, but Hercule Poirot would not rest until they were laid bare. Chapter 5. The Uncle's Gambit. The rain had ceased, leaving Ashburn Manor draped in a damp, silvery mist that clung to its ivy-clad walls. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the weather, adjusted his hat and stepped onto the gravel drive, his polished shoes crunching with deliberate precision. The manor loomed before him, its Gothic arches and tall windows exuding an air of secrets held too long. His return from the windswept coastal cottage had been swift, driven by the urgency of new clues: a torn scarf, a blood-stained handkerchief, and a cryptic message hinting at betrayal. These fragments of evidence swirled in his mind, each a piece of the puzzle that was Lady Eleanor Ashburn's disappearance. But today, his focus narrowed on one figure, Lord Archibald Ashburn, Lenore's uncle, whose evasive demeanor and guarded glances had piqued Poirot's suspicions. The grand oak doors creaked open, and a butler, stiff as a marionette, ushered Poirot into the cavernous hall. The air was heavy with a scent of polished wood and old money, but beneath it lingered a faint unease, as if the house itself held its breath. Poirot's mustache twitched as he surveyed the opulent surroundings, a chandelier dripping with crystal, portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and a marble staircase spiraling upward like a coiled serpent. He had no time for such grandeur today. His purpose was singular. "Lord Ashburn is in the study, Monsieur Poirot," the butler intoned, his voice as flat as the overcast sky. "He is expecting you." Bon Poirot replied, his tone clipped, yet courteous. "Lead on, if you please." The study was a fortress of dark mahogany and leather-bound books, its walls lined with shelves that seemed to groan under the weight of knowledge and secrets alike. Lord Ashburn sat behind a massive desk, his broad frame slouched in a high-backed chair. His face, weathered by years of privilege and worry, bore the faintest sheen of perspiration despite the chill in the room. He rose as Poirot entered, extending a hand that trembled slightly, a detail Poirot noted with interest. "Monsieur Poirot," Lord Ashburn said, his voice a strained attempt at warmth. "I trust your journey was not too taxing. This dreadful weather—" "The weather. It is of little consequence," Poirot interjected smoothly, settling into a chair opposite the desk, his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on Lord Ashburn. "It is the matter of your niece, Lady Eleanor, that brings me here. There are inconsistencies in the tale of her disappearance that require clarification." Lord Ashburn's smile faltered, and he sank back into his chair, fingers drumming on the desk. "Inconsistencies? I assure you, we've told you all we know. Eleanor was to announce her engagement, and then poof, she vanished. Kidnapped, no doubt, by some scoundrel, after her fortune." Poirot tilted his head, his expression one of polite skepticism. "Kidnapped, you say? Yet the evidence suggests otherwise. A love letter, hidden in her room, speaks of a heart not bound by an engagement arranged by others. And now, at the coastal cottage, I find signs of a struggler, scarf torn, a handkerchief stained with blood. These are not the hallmarks of a simple kidnapping, Nan." Lord Ashburn's face paled, and he reached for a crystal decanter of brandy, pouring himself a generous measure. "Blood? Good heavens, man, what are you implying?" "I imply nothing," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. "Observe, and I observe a man whose niece has vanished, yet whose concern seems tempered by other preoccupations, perhaps financial ones." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Lord Ashburn's hand froze mid-sip, and his eyes darted to a drawer in the desk, a movement so subtle it might have gone unnoticed by anyone but Poirot. The detective's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Permit me to speak plainly, Lord Ashburn," Poirot continued, leaning forward. "The disappearance of Lady Eleanor is not merely a matter of a wayward heiress. There is a pattern, a web of motives and secrets, and I suspect, monsieur, that you are entangled in it. Shall we discuss the state of your finances, perhaps the true nature of Eleanor's inheritance?" Lord Ashburn slammed his glass down, the brandy sloshing over the rim. "This is preposterous. You dare accuse me in my own home." "I accuse no one," Poirot said calmly, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "I seek only the truth. And the truth, it has a way of revealing itself, no matter how deeply it is buried. For instance," he paused, reaching into his coat pocket to produce a small, leather-bound ledger, its edges worn, but its pages meticulously kept. He had discovered it the previous evening, tucked behind a false panel in Eleanor's room, a discovery he had kept to himself until this moment. Lord Ashburn's eyes widened, and he lunged forward, only to catch himself and slump back in his chair. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "A most curious find," Poirot said, flipping open the ledger to reveal columns of figures, each entry detailing sums withdrawn from Eleanor's trust. "It seems, monsieur, that significant portions of your niece's inheritance have been redirected to accounts in your name, perhaps, or to cover debts that have accumulated over the years." The room grew oppressively silent, save for the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Lord Ashburn's face was a mask of conflicting emotions: fear, anger, and something akin to resignation. Poirot waited, his patience a weapon, as sharp as any blade. "It's not what you think," Lord Ashburn said at last, his voice hoarse. "The estate. It's been bleeding money for years. The crash of '29 hit us hard, and Eleanor's trust was the only thing keeping us afloat. I borrowed, yes, but I intended to repay it. She was to marry a wealthy man, Lord Carlton, who would have secured her future and ours." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his disapproval. "And yet, Lady Eleanor did not wish to marry Lord Carlton, did she? She had other plans with a certain artist, perhaps, plans you found inconvenient." Lord Ashburn's hands clenched into fists. "Oh, Poirot, he's a nobody, a penniless dreamer who filled her head with nonsense. Eleanor's duty was to the family, to the estate. I couldn't let her throw it all away." "So you took steps," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "Steps to ensure her compliance, or perhaps to ensure her silence." "No." Lord Ashburn's voice cracked, and he rose, pacing to the window. The mist outside seemed to seep into the room, blurring the edges of reality. "I would never harm her. I love Eleanor, she's like a daughter to me. But I may have pushed her too far. When she refused Carlton, I threatened to cut her off. I thought it would bring her to her senses. And when it did not, when she fled, perhaps to protect her love, what then? Did you seek her out? Did you send someone to the cottage by the sea?" Lord Ashburn spun around, his face ashen. "I sent no one. Swear it. I was desperate. Yes, but I didn't know where she'd gone. When I heard she was missing, I thought she'd run off with that artist I didn't know about. And he got it until you mentioned it." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The man's desperation was palpable, but was it genuine? The ledger told one story, but there was another, deeper tale, one tied to the blood-stained handkerchief and the torn scarf. And then there was the matter of Eleanor's lineage, a whisper of scandal that had surfaced in Poirot's inquiries. He decided to press further, to test the waters of Lord Ashburn's candor. "There is another matter," Poirot said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "A delicate one. It concerns Eleanor's mother, Lady Margaret. Rumors whispers in the village, in the tea-houses, that her marriage to your brother was not unblemished, that Eleanor's birth may carry a shadow of doubt. Is this true?" Lord Ashburn froze, his breath catching. For a moment, Poirot thought the man might collapse. Then, with a shudder, he sank into his chair, his hands covering his face. "You've been thorough, haven't you?" he muttered, his voice muffled. "Yes, it's true. Margaret had an affair before Eleanor was born. My brother knew, but he raised Eleanor as his own. We kept it quiet. God knows what it would do to the family's name if it got out. But Eleanor, she found out last year, changed her. She became defiant, reckless. She said she didn't know us anything, not after the lies." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. This revelation added a new layer to Eleanor's flight of rebellion, not just against an arranged marriage, but against a family built on deception. It also gave Lord Ashburn a motive beyond money, preserving the family's honor. But had he gone so far as to orchestrate her disappearance? The evidence was tantalizing, but incomplete. Mercy, Lord Ashburn, Poirot said, rising with a fluid grace. You have been most illuminating. But I must warn you, the truth is a persistent thing. It will not remain hidden for long. As he turned to leave, a soft knock interrupted them. The butler entered, holding a silver tray with a single envelope. For Monsieur Poirot, he said, bowing slightly. Poirot took the envelope, his fingers brushing the crisp paper. Bore no return address, only his name in elegant script. He opened it with care, revealing a single sheet of paper. The message was brief, written in a hurried hand. In Poirot, beware the shadows. The truth lies not with the lord, but with the lady who dances in moonlight. Seek her at the ball. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A new player had entered the game, a lady who danced in moonlight. He tucked the note into his pocket, his mind already turning to the grand ball the Ashburns were hosting tomorrow night. A light was an opportunity to observe, to probe, to uncover the next thread in this intricate tapestry. Lord Ashburn, Poirot said, pausing at the door, I trust you'll be at the ball tomorrow. It promises to be most revealing. The older man nodded weakly, his eyes haunted. Poirot stepped into the hall, the butler closing the door behind him. Manor's grandeur felt oppressive now, its walls whispering secrets that begged to be heard. As he made his way to the guest quarters, Poirot's thoughts were a whirlwind of connections to Leno's rebellion, her uncle's desperation, the mysterious note, and beneath it all, a faint, unfamiliar stirring in his heart. Sympathy for the young lovers caught in this web of deceit. He paused at a window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded grounds. The rain had begun again, a soft patter against the glass. Poirot adjusted his cufflinks, his reflection sharp and resolute. The truth was close. He could feel it, like the scent of his beloved tisane, lingering in the air. Tomorrow, at the ball, he would find the lady who danced in moonlight, and with her, perhaps, the key to Eleanor's fate. The chapter closed with Poirot retiring to his room, the ledger and note safely tucked away. He lit a single candle, its flame casting shadows that danced like secrets across the walls. Sipped his tisane. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not in the partial confession he had wrung from Lord Ashburn, but in the certainty that the puzzle was taking shape. The game was far from over, but Hercule Poirot was, as always, one step ahead. Chapter 6. A Dance of Deceptions. The grand ballroom of Ashburn Manor glittered under the chandelier's golden glow, a constellation of crystal casting flecks of light across the polished oak floor. The air thrummed with the delicate strains of a string quartet, weaving a tapestry of elegance that belied the undercurrents of deceit Hercule Poirot sensed in every corner. Tonight, the Ashburn family hosted a ball, ostensibly to maintain appearances amid Lady Eleanor's disappearance. But Poirot knew better. Such gatherings were theaters of human nature, where masks were worn not just on faces, but on hearts. And he, Hercule Poirot, was here to unmask them, dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit. His mustache waxed to perfection. Poirot stood near a marble pillar, his sharp eyes scanning the swirling crowd. Ladies in silk gowns twirled with gentlemen in crisp evening wear, their laughter a fragile veneer over the manor's secrets. The scent of lavender perfume mingled with the faint ting of champagne, and Poirot sipped his own glass sparingly, preferring the clarity of his beloved tisane, though none was to be found here. His task tonight was singular: to observe, to listen, and to uncover the thread that would lead him closer to Eleanor Ashburn. The events of the past days weighed on his mind. The wind-swept cottage by the sea, with its torn scarf and blood-stained handkerchief, had confirmed his suspicion of foul play, though the preserved clues suggested Eleanor might still be alive. Lord Ashburn's financial schemes uncovered. In the hidden ledger pointed to a motive rooted in greed, yet his denial of harming Eleanor rang oddly sincere. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with possibilities, each guessed a potential piece in the puzzle. Somewhere in this glittering throng lay the key to Eleanor's fate. A sudden ripple in the crowd drew his attention. A woman, striking in a gown of midnight blue, glided through the room with an air of quiet authority. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and a single sapphire pendant gleamed at her throat. She moved with the grace of a panther, her eyes darting with purpose, as if searching for someone or something. Poirot's instincts prickled. This was no ordinary guest. "Monsieur," he murmured, setting his glass on a passing tray. "Who is this femme mysterious?" He approached with the measured calm of a man accustomed to unraveling secrets. As he drew near, she turned, her gaze locking with his. Her eyes, a deep hazel, held a spark of recognition, though Poirot was certain they had never met. She smiled, a curve of lips that was both inviting and guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, I presume." Her voice was low, with a faint accent he couldn't place, perhaps French, perhaps something more exotic. "Your reputation precedes you." "And yet, madame, I find myself at a disadvantage," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "You know my name, but I do not know yours." She extended a gloved hand. "Celeste Varnier, a friend of the Ashburn family." Poirot took her hand, noting the firmness of her grip and the slight tremor that betrayed her composure. "Pleasure, Madame Varnier. Hey, and what brings a friend of the family to this splendid affair?" Her smile tightened. "Oh, the usual reasons. Music, dancing, and perhaps a touch of intrigue." "You, I suspect, are here for the latter." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Intrigue is a strong word, madame. I am merely a guest, enjoying the hospitality of Ashburn Manor." She laughed, a sound like the chime of crystal. "Come now, Monsieur Poirot. A man of your talents does not attend a ball for the waltz alone. You are hunting, are you not, for answers about poor Eleanor?" The directness of her words caught him off guard, but Poirot's expression remained serene. "You speak of Lady Eleanor's disappearance with familiarity. Have you, perhaps, knowledge that could assist a humble detective?" Madame Varnier's eyes flickered, as if weighing her next move. "Knowledge is a dangerous thing, Monsieur Poirot, but I will offer you this. Eleanor was not as alone as her family claims. Okay. There are places hidden, places where secrets like hers find shelter." Poirot leaned closer, his voice a velvet murmur. "And where might such a place be?" "Madame," she tilted her head, her sapphire pendant catching the light. "Dance with me, Monsieur Poirot, and perhaps I shall tell you." The quartet struck up a waltz, its melody lilting and irresistible. Poirot hesitated only a moment before offering his arm. A bean, a dance for a secret, a fair exchange. They joined the flow of dancers, Poirot's movements precise and graceful, belying his compact frame. Madame Varnier matched him effortlessly, her steps light but deliberate, as if the dance itself were a conversation. Around them, the ballroom spun in a kaleidoscope of color and sound. But Poirot's focus remained on his partner. "You move well, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice teasing. "One might almost forget you are a detective. Can't you?" "Madame, dance as one accustomed to leading," he replied. "But tell me, what is your connection to Eleanor? A friend, a confidant, ... or something more?" Her smile faltered, just for a heartbeat. "I knew her mother, years ago, spirited woman, much like Eleanor. When I heard of Eleanor's disappearance, I came to offer my support. But I found whispers, rumors of a place where she might be hiding." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A place, you say? A sanctuary?" Perhaps. She spun away, then returned to his arms, her breath warm against his ear. An old chapel, abandoned on the edge of the estate. Few know of it. Fewer still would dare to go there. The music swelled, and Poirot's mind raced. It's an abandoned chapola, perfect hideout for a fugitive heiress. But why reveal this now, and why to him? Madame Varnier's words were a lure, but whether they led to truth or a trap, he could not yet discern. The waltz ended, and the dancers applauded. Poirot released Madame Varnier, bowing deeply. "You have given me much to ponder, madame, but I must ask why. Trust me with this." Gaze softened, and for the first time, Poirot glimpsed vulnerability beneath her poised exterior. "Because, Monsieur Poirot, I believe you are the only one who can bring her back. Okay? Because I, too, know what it is to love in secret." Before he could respond, she slipped into the crowd, her blue gown vanishing like a wisp of smoke. Poirot stood motionless, the weight of her words settling over him. Love in secret. The phrase echoed, stirring memories of Eleanor's hidden letter, of Julian Moreau's fervent paintings. But Madame Varnier's role in this drama remained elusive. Was she an ally or a player in a deeper game? Determined to test her lead, Poirot navigated the ballroom, his senses attuned to every detail. He paused near a group of guests, catching fragments of conversation. A young woman in emerald silk whispered to her companion about a scandalous aunt who had once been banished from the family. Poirot's ears pricked. Could this be Madame Varnier? He filed the tidbit away, his mind already turning to the chapel. As he moved toward the terrace for a breath of air, a commotion erupted near the center of the room. Lord Ashburn, his face flushed with wine, was arguing with a tall, gaunt man in a severe black suit. The man's voice was low, but his words carried a venomous edge. "You cannot hide the truth forever." "Ashburn," the man hissed, "the girl's disappearance is your doing." Lord Ashburn's laugh was forced. "Nonsense, Reginald. You've always been prone to dramatics." Poirot edged closer, his presence unnoticed. The man, Reginald, was unfamiliar, but his accusation aligned with Poirot's suspicions of Lord Ashburn's involvement. Yet there was something theatrical in Reginald's demeanor, as if he were performing for an audience. Poirot's instincts warned of a diversion, slipping onto the terrace. Poirot found a moment of quiet beneath the starlit sky. The cool night air sharpened his thoughts. The chapel, Madame Varnier had said, a place few would dare to go. A recalled the estate's layout, piecing together fragments from his earlier inquiries. There was indeed an old chapel, half ruined, tucked in a wooded corner of the grounds. It was a plausible hideout, but also a perfect stage for an ambush. He needed a plan. Returning to the ballroom would risk losing the night's momentum, but going to the chapel unprepared was foolhardy. A. Poirot's gaze fell on a young footman, hovering near the terrace doors with a tray of glasses. The boy's nervous demeanor suggested he was more than a servant, perhaps a witness, or even a conspirator. "Pardon, Jeanne," Poirot said, approaching with a disarming smile. "You seem troubled. Is there something you wish to share with Hercule Poirot?" The footman started, nearly dropping his tray. No, sir. Just doing my duties." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon ami, your duties do not include trembling like a leaf. Come, tell me, what have you seen or heard that makes you so uneasy?" The boy glanced around, then leaned closer. "It's not my place, sir, but I saw someone near the old chapel last night. A woman, cloaked, moving quick-like. I thought it was a ghost, but now, with Lady Eleanor gone, ... Poirot's heart quickened. "A woman, you say? Did you see her face?" "No, sir. It's too dark. But she carried a lantern, and she was headed toward the chapel. I didn't follow. Place gives me the creeps." Poirot patted the boy's shoulder. "You have done well to tell me. Now, go about your duties, and speak of this to no one." The footman nodded, relieved, and scurried back to the barroom. Poirot's mind whirred. Cloaked woman at the chapel, could it be Eleanor, or perhaps Madame Varnier herself? The pieces were aligning, but the picture remained incomplete. He re-entered the ballroom, his resolve hardened. The night was still young, and the dance of deceptions was far from over. He approached a group of matrons, their gossip a goldmine of half-truths. With charm and subtle probing, he confirmed the rumor of a banished Aunt Eleanor's mother's sister, ostracized for a scandalous affair decades ago. The description matched Madame Varnier's elegance and enigmatic air. She was no mere family friend. She was Celeste Ashburn, the estranged aunt, returned under a false name. The revelation electrified Poirot. Celeste's knowledge of the chapel, her cryptic hints about Eleanor's whereabouts, and her admission of knowing secret love all pointed to a deeper connection. But was she protecting Eleanor, or manipulating the narrative for her own ends? Poirot needed to confront her again. Quote, she had vanished into the crowd. As the clock struck midnight, the ball reached its crescendo. Poirot, undeterred, slipped away from the revelry, his destination clear. He retrieved his coat and a small flashlight from his room, then made his way to the estate's edge, where the woods swallowed the moonlight. The chapel loomed ahead, its crumbling spire a silhouette against the night sky. Before entering, Poirot paused, his senses alert. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine. A faint rustle in the underbrush set his nerves on edge, but it was only a fox, its eyes glinting in the dark. He pressed on, his flashlight casting a narrow beam across the chapel's weathered door. Inside, the air was musty, the pews draped in cobwebs. Poirot's beam swept the room, landing on a small altar where a single candle flickered, its wax pooling on the stone. Someone had been here recently. He moved silently, his steps muffled by years of dust. A faint scrape echoed from the shadows, and Poirot froze. "Qui est là?" he called, his voice steady but commanding. No answer came, but the scrape repeated. Closer now. Poirot's hand tightened on his flashlight, ready to wield it as a weapon if needed. He stepped toward the sound, his heart steady despite the darkness. A figure emerged, a woman, cloaked, her face obscured by a hood. "Madame Varnier," Poirot said, his tone firm. Should I say, Mademoiselle Celeste Ashburn?" The figure stiffened, then lowered her hood, revealing the auburn hair and hazel eyes Poirot had come to know. "You are as clever as they say, Monsieur Poirot," Celeste said, her voice tinged with resignation. "But you were too late." "Too late for what, mademoiselle?" Poirot asked, stepping closer. "To save Eleanor, or to uncover your role in this charade." Celeste's lips parted, but before she could speak, a low groan echoed from behind the altar. Poirot's flashlight swung toward the sound, revealing a hidden alcove. There, slumped against the wall, was a young woman, Eleanor Ashburn, her face pale but alive. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot exclaimed, rushing to her side. "Mademoiselle Eleanor, are you harmed?" Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, her voice weak. "Monsieur Poirot. Celeste, she tried to help me. ... Poirot turned to Celeste, his gaze piercing. "Explain, mademoiselle," and quickly, Celeste's shoulders sagged. "I am her aunt, as you've guessed. I came to protect her from my brother, Lord Ashburn. He hired men to frighten her into returning to secure her fortune. I brought her here to hide, but his men are close, too close." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the final threads. Celeste's motives were genuine, but the danger was real. He helped Eleanor to her feet, his voice calm but urgent. "We must leave, tout de suite. The chapel is no longer safe." As they moved toward the door, a shadow loomed outside. A man, broad-shouldered and menacing, blocking their path. Poirot's heart sank, but his resolve held firm. The dance of deceptions had led him here, and he would not falter now. With a swift motion, he grabbed the candle from the altar, its flame casting wild shadows. "Monsieur, you will step aside," he said, his voice a blade of authority. "Or you will answer to Hercule Poirot." The man hesitated, then retreated into the night, cowed by Poirot's unyielding presence. Poirot guided Eleanor and Celeste out, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Stay where a trusted friend, Captain Hastings, summoned earlier, waited with a car. As they sped away, Eleanor safe in the back seat, Poirot turned to Celeste. "You have risked much, mademoiselle, but the truth is not yet fully revealed. Tomorrow we return to Ashbourne Manor." Celeste nodded, her face etched with determination. "For Eleanor's sake, I will face my brother." The car hummed through the night, and Poirot leaned back, the thrill of the chase pulsing in his veins. The orchestra of the ball seemed a distant memory, but its rhythm lingered in his heart. The chapel had yielded its secret, but the final reckoning awaited. Now he closed his eyes, the stars above a silent witness to his triumph. Chapter 7. The Hidden Sanctuary. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills of the English countryside as Hercule Poirot's hired car wound its way toward the village of Little Havisham. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming hawthorn, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Poirot's mind. Kay's polished shoes tapped rhythmically against the floorboard, a metronome to his racing thoughts. The cryptic lead from Madame Celeste at the Ashbourne ball, delivered mid-waltz with a knowing smile, had pointed him to an abandoned chapel nestled in a forgotten corner of the estate. It was, she had whispered, Eleanor Ashbourne's sanctuary. Poirot's instincts told him this was no mere hideaway. It was the heart of the mystery. The car slowed as the driver, taciturn man with a penchant for whistling, navigated a narrow lane bordered by gnarled oaks. "This be as far as I go, sir," he said, tipping his cap. "Path to the chapel's up yonder, but mind yourself, for it's a queer place. Folks say it's cursed." Poirot raised an eyebrow, adjusting his hat. "Cursed, you say? Bah, monsieur, the only curse is the imagination of idle tongues. Merci for your service." He stepped out, his cane sinking slightly into the soft earth, and dismissed the driver with a nod. The chapel's silhouette loomed against the fading light, its spire jagged like a broken tooth. Ivy clung to its weathered stones, and the stained glass windows, cracked but defiant, glinted with the last rays of daylight. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Place of secrets," he murmured. But secrets they did not hide from Hercule Poirot. The path to the chapel was overgrown, brambles snagging at his immaculate trousers. He pressed forward, his sharp eyes scanning for signs of life. A faint scuff mark on a stone caught his attentia boot print. Fresh and too large to belong to the delicate Lady Eleanor. His pulse quickened. Someone else was here, or had been recently. The door, heavy oak with rusted hinges, creaked as he pushed it open. The interior was dim, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of mildew. Pews lay in disarray, and a tattered altarcloth fluttered in a draught. Poirot's gaze darted to the shadows, where a faint rustle betrayed movement. "Montrez-vous," he called, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Hercule Poirot does not play games with phantoms." Silence answered, but the rustle came again, sharper now, from behind the altar. He stepped forward, cane raised like a fencer's foil, his senses attuned to every nuance. A figure emerged, a burly man, broad-shouldered, with a face like weathered granite. His eyes, narrow and wary, locked onto Poirot's. In his hand gleamed a knife, its blade catching the dim light. "You're a long way from London," little man, the stranger growled, his voice low and gravelly. This ain't your business. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, unruffled. Contraire, monsieur, it is precisely my business. The safety of Mademoiselle Eleanor Ashburn concerns me greatly. And you, I suspect, are not here to pray. The man's grip tightened on the knife, but Poirot's calm demeanor seemed to unsettle him. You don't scare easy, do you? He said, stepping closer. Turn around and walk away, or you'll regret it. Poirot tilted his head, his eyes gleaming with calculation. Regret, monsieur? Nan, it is you who will regret if you do not lower that blade. Hercule Poirot does not negotiate with ruffians. He tapped his cane lightly against the floor, the sound sharp in the stillness. Tell me, who pays you to guard this place? Lord Ashburn, perhaps? Oh, is there another player in this game of shadows? The man hesitated, his bravado faltering under Poirot's piercing gaze. I don't answer to you, he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot seized the moment, stepping forward with surprising agility, his cane flashing up to knock the knife from the man's hand. It clattered to the floor, and before the thug could react, Poirot pressed the tip of his cane against the man's chest. Enough of this nonsense, Poirot said, sharply. You will tell me where Mademoiselle Eleanor is, or I shall ensure the local constabulary makes your acquaintance, and I assure you they are less charming than I. The man's shoulders slumped, defeated. Kata, she's in the crypt, he muttered, jerking his head toward a stone staircase descending into darkness. Kata, but you won't like what you find. Kairos. Heart skipped a beat, but his face remained impassive. We shall see, he said, gesturing for the man to lead the way. And do not think to try anything foolish. My patience, it is not infinite. The crypt was a labyrinth of damp stone and flickering shadows, lit only by a single lantern the thug carried. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. Poirot's polished shoes echoed on the uneven floor as they descended, his mind racing. Eleanor was here, alive. Why had she not fled? What fear held her in this forsaken place? The thug stopped at a heavy iron gate, rusted but sturdy, and fumbled with the key. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he noted the man's trembling hands. Fear, not loyalty, drove this brute. The gate swung open, revealing a small chamber. There, curled on a makeshift pallet of blankets, was Lady Eleanor Ashburn. Her auburn hair was disheveled, her face pale, but her eyes blazed with a mixture of fear and defiance. She scrambled to her feet, clutching a tattered shawl around her shoulders. Monsieur Poirot, she gasped, her voice trembling. How did you find me? Poirot bowed slightly, his expression softening. Mademoiselle, the little gray cells, they do not rest until justice is served. But tell me, why do you hide in this place of gloom? And who is this man who guards you like a dragon? Eleanor's gaze flicked to the thug, who shifted uncomfortably under Poirot's scrutiny. His name is Grimes, she said, her voice low. My uncle hired him to keep me here. He threatened Julian, said he'd ruin him, or worse, if I didn't stay hidden. Poirot's mustache bristled with indignation. Lord Ashburn, he plays a dangerous game, he said, turning to Grimes. And you, Monsieur Grimes, you allow yourself to be a pawn in this scheme? For what? Few coins to betray a young woman's freedom? Grimes scowled, but said nothing, his eyes darting to the gate as if contemplating escape. Poirot stepped closer to Eleanor, his voice gentle. Mademoiselle, you are safe now. I must know, why did you not flee? This man, he cannot watch. You, every moment. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but her jaw set with resolve. I stayed to protect Julian. My uncle knows about our plan to elope. He said if I left, he'd have Julian arrested for theft false charges. But enough. To ruin him. I couldn't let that happen. Poirot nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. Lord Ashburn's desperation to control Eleanor's fortune had driven him to extreme measures. There was more to this. Poirot sensed a deeper motive, perhaps tied to the family secret he'd uncovered in Chapter 5. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you were brave, but this charade, it ends now. Come, we will leave this place." Grimes shifted, blocking the gate. "You ain't taking her nowhere," he growled, but his voice wavered. "Ha!" Poirot's eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity. "Monsieur Grimes," he said, his tone icy, "you have two choices. Step aside, and perhaps I will speak kindly of you to the authorities. Or obstruct me, and I assure you the consequences will be most unpleasant." He tapped his cane again, the sound sharp and final. Grimes hesitated, then stepped back, muttering. Under his breath, Poirot offered Eleanor his arm, guiding her toward the stairs. "Courage, mademoiselle," he said softly. "The light, it is not far." As they emerged into the chapel's nave, the evening air felt like a balm after the crypt's oppressive gloom. Eleanor's steps faltered, and Poirot steadied her, his expression one of quiet resolve. "We cannot return to Ashburn Manor," he said. "Your uncle, he is not to be trusted. I have a friend, Madame Duval, who lives nearby. Home is modest but safe. You will stay there until we resolve this matter." Eleanor nodded, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't know who to trust." Poirot smiled faintly. "Trust in the little gray cells, mademoiselle. They do not fail." The journey to Madame Duval's cottage was swift, the countryside now cloaked in twilight. Madame Duval, a stout woman with a warm smile and a penchant for lavender tea, welcomed them with open arms. "Monsieur Poirot, you bring me such excitement," she exclaimed, ushering Eleanor inside. "The poor dear looks half-starved. I'll fix her a proper supper." Poirot bowed. "Madame, your kindness is a treasure. Sure Mademoiselle Eleanor is safe, and I shall return soon." He turned to Eleanor. "Rest, mademoiselle. The danger, it is not yet past, but you are in good hands." As Eleanor settled by the fire, Poirot stepped outside, his mind already turning to the next move. Lord Ashburn's scheme was unraveling, but the thug, Grimes, had been a hired hand, not the mastermind. Death was another player, Poirot suspected, someone orchestrating the threats against Eleanor and Julia Moreau. The blackmailer hinted at in Madame Celeste's riddles, perhaps, or a figure yet to emerge from the shadows. He lit a cigarette, a rare indulgence, and watched the smoke curl into the starry sky. "The heart, it hides many truths," he mused, "but Hercule Poirot, he will uncover them all." The night was still, save for the distant call of an owl. Poirot's thoughts drifted to Julienne Moreau, the artist whose love for Eleanor had sparked this tangled web. Tomorrow he would seek him out, reunite the lovers, and set a trap for the true culprit. For now, Eleanor was safe, and that was a victory. He extinguished his cigarette, adjusted his hat, and walked into the darkness, his steps light with the thrill of the chase. The chapter closed with Poirot's silhouette fading into the night. A man alone but undaunted, his mind a beacon in the fog of deception. The sanctuary had been breached, but the mystery's heart still beat, waiting for his final reckoning. Chapter 8. The Heart's Confession. The fog draped London like a velvet curtain, softening the edges of the city's grand facades and muffling the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped from a hansom cab onto the damp pavement of a narrow street in Bloomsbury. The air was heavy with the scent of coal smoke and rain, and the faint glow of gas lamps flickered through the mist, casting long shadows that danced like specters. His destination was a small, unassuming café, Le Cygne Noir. tucked between a bookbinder's shop and a milliner's. Teas, windows glowing with a warm, amber light that promised refuge from the chill. Poirot adjusted his hat, his sharp eyes scanning the street. The reunion of Lady Eleanor Ashburn and Julianne Moreau, so tenderly orchestrated in the previous chapter, had brought a fleeting moment of joy. Yet, as Poirot had anticipated, happiness in matters of the heart was rarely unshadowed. A new threat had emerged, a blackmailer, brazen and cunning, who demanded a steep price for silence about Eleanor and Julian's clandestine romance. The audacity of the demand, delivered in a scrawled note slipped under Eleanor's door, had set Poirot's mind ablaze with calculation. The blackmailer had chosen a dangerous game, and Poirot was determined to outwit them. Inside Le Cygne Noir, the atmosphere was a curious blend of cozy and clandestine. Was a haunt for artists, poets, and the occasional eccentric, its walls adorned with mismatched paintings and shelves of well-worn books. The clink of porcelain cups and the low hum of conversation filled the air, underscored by the soft strains of a gramophone playing a melancholic French chanson. Poirot selected a corner table, partially obscured by a velvet curtain, offering a clear view of the entrance. He ordered a tisane chamomile to steady his nerves, settled in to wait. The note, which Eleanor had tearfully handed to him, was a masterpiece of menace in its brevity. £10,000, or the world will know of your scandalous elopement. Midnight, Le Cygne Noir, table by the window. Come alone. The sum was staggering, enough to ruin even a family as wealthy as the Ashburns. Poirot's mustache twitched as he recalled the handwriting, bold, uneven, with a flourish on the Y that suggested a hand accustomed to defiance. It was a clue, but not enough. The blackmailer's identity remained a shadow, though Poirot's suspicions, honed by days of investigation, pointed to a familiar figure, the groundskeeper, Thomas Rudd, whose jealous glare and furtive movements in the village had not escaped Poirot's notice as the clock above the counter ticked toward midnight. Poirot sipped his tisane, his mind a whirl of connections. Rudd, a man of rough charm and simmering resentment, had been in love with Eleanor, or so the village gossip suggested. His confrontation with Poirot in Chapter 2 had revealed a temper, and his knowledge of the manor's secrets made him a plausible candidate for blackmail. Yet Poirot's method demanded certainty, not conjecture. He had devised a trap, simple yet elegant, to unmask the culprit. Eleanor, safely hidden at the home of Poirot's trusted friend, Captain Hastings, was not to attend. Instead, Poirot had enlisted a discreet alaya young actress named Clara, whose talent for mimicry and courage under pressure made her ideal for the role of Eleanor in disguise. The cafe door swung open, emitting a gust of damp air and a figure cloaked in a dark shawl. Clara, her face partially veiled, moved with the nervous grace of a frightened heiress. Her auburn wig, a near-perfect match for Eleanor's hair, gleamed under the lamplight as she took her seat by the window, as instructed. Poirot watched from his shadowed corner, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. Clara's performance was flawless, her posture tense, her glances darting, just every gesture a mirror of Eleanor's anxious demeanor. Minutes passed, heavy with anticipation. The gramophone switched to a slower tune, its mournful notes weaving through the haze of cigarette smoke. At precisely midnight, the door opened again, and a man entered, his face obscured by a low-brimmed hat. He moved with purpose, his boots heavy on the wooden floor, and slid into the seat opposite Clara. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The man's build, the slope of his shoulders, it was unmistakably Thomas Rudd. The groundskeeper leaned forward, his voice a low growl, barely audible over the cafe's hum. "You brought the money?" he asked, his tone laced with greed. Clara, as Eleanor hesitated, her gloved hands trembling convincingly. I need assurances," she stammered. "How do I know you won't betray me again?" Rudd's laugh was harsh, like gravel underfoot. "You don't, but you'll pay, or every paper in London will print your shame. You and that artist think you can run off and leave me in the dirt." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Rudd's words were a confession, unguarded and damning, but the trap was not yet sprung. Clara, following Poirot's instructions, slid a leather satchel across the table, its weight suggesting a fortune in banknotes. In truth, it contained only paper, cut to the size of pound notes to draw Rudd into the open. Rudd reached for the satchel, his eyes gleaming with triumph, but Poirot was already moving. He rose silently, his cane tapping lightly as he approached the table. "Monsieur Rudd," he said, his voice calm but cutting, "I believe you have mistaken your opponent." Rudd froze, his hand on the satchel, his face a mask of shock. The café's patrons, sensing drama, turned to watch, their murmurs fading into a tense silence. Clara stood, shedding her shawl to reveal her true identity, her eyes bright with the thrill of the charade. "You," Rudd spat, his voice rising. "This is a trick." "Prisement," Poirot replied, his tone as smooth as polished marble. "A trick to expose a heart consumed by jealousy. You sought to profit from Mademoiselle Eleanor's love, to punish her for choosing another. But you have underestimated Hercule Poirot." Rudd's face twisted, a mix of rage and panic. He lunged to his feet, knocking over a chair, but the café door burst open, and two constables, summoned earlier by Poirot's discreet message to Scotland Yard, stepped inside. Their presence was a quiet thunderclap, their uniforms a stark contrast to the café's bohemian charm. "Thomas Rudd," one of the constables intoned, "you're under arrest for blackmail and attempted extortion." Rudd's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him as the constables cuffed his wrists. Poirot watched, his expression unreadable, though a flicker of satisfaction passed through his gray eyes. Clara, ever the professional, gathered her shawl and slipped out, her role complete. The café patrons erupted into excited chatter, the gramophone forgotten as the drama unfolded. As the constables led Rudd away, Poirot lingered at the table, examining the satchel. Inside, tucked among the false notes, was a folded letter Rudd's original blackmail demand, left carelessly in his haste. Poirot unfolded it, his gloved fingers tracing the scrawled words. The flourish on the Y was unmistakable, as was the faint scent of tobacco and earth, a groundskeeper's signature. It was all the confirmation he needed. The fog had thickened. By the time Poirot stepped back onto the street, the constable's wagon vanishing into the mist, he hailed a cab, his mind turning to the deeper currents of the case. Rudd's blackmail had been driven by jealousy, a heart wounded by Eleanor's rejection. Yet Poirot knew that love, even in its darkest forms, was a force that could unravel the most disciplined mind. He thought of Eleanor and Julian, their love now free from this particular shadow, although the specter of Lord Ashburn's schemes still loomed. The cab rattled toward Hastings' modest townhouse, where Eleanor and Julian waited. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed, reflecting on the night's events. The café's warmth, Clara's bravery. Rudd's downfall. It was a tableau of human passion, played out with the precision of a symphony. Yet Poirot's heart, so often guarded, stirred with a quiet melancholy. Love, he mused, was both a flame and a blade, warming and wounding in equal measure. At Hastings' home, the reunion was subdued but heartfelt. Eleanor, her face pale but radiant, clasped Julian's hand as Poirot recounted the evening's triumph. Hastings, ever the loyal friend, poured a glass of brandy for himself and offered one to Poirot, who declined with a polite wave. "You've done it again, old chap," Hastings said, his voice warm with admiration. "How did you know it was Rudd?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "The heart, mon ami, betrays itself in small ways. Rudd's eyes in the village, his bitterness, his knowledge of Eleanor's movements, Sid, was a pattern, clear to the little gray cells. The blackmail note merely confirmed what Poirot already suspected. Eleanor's voice trembled as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, how can we ever thank you? That man has succeeded." Poirot raised a hand, his expression softening. "Mademoiselle, your happiness is thanks enough. But we are not yet at the end. Your uncle, Lord Ashburn, has much to answer for. Tomorrow we return to Ashburn Manor, and the final act of this drama will unfold." Julian, his artist's hands stained with faint traces of paint, nodded solemnly. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Poirot inclined his head, a gesture of respect. "C'est bien. Love, when true, is a fortress. Hold fast to it." As he stepped into the foggy night, Poirot paused under a gas lamp, its light casting a halo around him. The case was nearing its climax, but this chapter, with its dance of deception and revelation, was complete. Rudd's arrest had severed one thread of the web, but the greater tapestry, Lord Ashburn's motives, the blood-stained handkerchief, the hired thug, remained. Poirot's mind, ever restless, churned with possibilities, yet he allowed himself a moment of contentment. The lovers were safe, the blackmailer undone, and justice, for now, had prevailed. He turned his collar against a chill and walked into the fog. His silhouette fading into the London night, a solitary figure, driven by the unyielding pursuit of truth and the quiet ache of a heart that understood all too well the destructive power of unrequited love. Chapter 9. The Final Reckoning. The grand drawing-room of Ashburn Manor glowed under the soft flicker of crystal chandeliers, their light dancing across polished mahogany and gilded mirrors. The air was thick with anticipation, a tension that clung to the velvet drapes and settled into the plush armchairs where the assembled guests sat. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, fastidious frame commanding attention despite the opulence surrounding him. His mustache, impeccably waxed, gleamed as he surveyed the faces before him, each one a piece in the intricate puzzle he had spent weeks assembling. The missing heiress, Lady Eleanor Ashburn, was safe at last, but the threads of deceit woven around her disappearance demanded a final reckoning. The room held a cast of characters as varied as the motives Poirot had uncovered. Lord Ashburn, patriarch of the manor, sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, his knuckles white against the armrests, his eyes darting nervously. Beside him, his sister, Madame Celestre, veiled to be Eleanor's estranged aunt, clutched a lace handkerchief, her enigmatic smile betraying nothing. Julien Moreau, the artist and Eleanor's secret love, stood near the fireplace, his bohemian scarf a splash of color against the somber mood. The groundskeeper, Albert Finch, recently exposed as a jealous blackmailer, was absent, his fate sealed by handcuffs in a London cell. Eleanor herself, pale but resolute, sat beside Moreau, her hand resting lightly on his arm. A handful of manor staff and village notables completed the gathering. Their whispers hushed as Poirot cleared his throat. "Madame et Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Tonight we unravel the final threads of a tapestry most intricate, a tale of love, betrayal, and greed that has brought us to the heart of Ashburn Manor. The disappearance of Lady Eleanor was no simple act of caprice, nor was it the work of a single villain. Nan, it was a conspiracy of motives, each one cloaked in shadow, until the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot brought them to light. He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor, his hands clasped behind his back. Us began at the beginning, n'est-ce pas? Lady Eleanor, the heiress to a fortune, vanished on the eve of her engagement announcement. Kidnapping, her family claimed, yet the evidence so, how it spoke otherwise. A love letter, hidden in her room, revealed a heart pledged to another, Monsieur Julien Moreau. He gestured toward the artist, whose jaw tightened, but who remained silent. This letter, it was the first clue that Eleanor's departure was no abduction, but a choice to flee a life dictated by others. Eleanor's eyes met Poirot's, a flicker of gratitude in their depths. He continued, "But why flee? And why the secrecy? Kay, the answer lies in the heart of this family, where love and greed have danced a dangerous waltz. Let us consider Lord Ashburn." Poirot turned to the patriarch, whose face flushed crimson. "Q, monsieur, stood to lose much if Eleanor married outside your approval. Her fortune, so carefully guarded, was slipping through your fingers, because of her love, but because of your own indiscretions." Lord Ashburn rose, his voice a growl. "This is preposterous. I've done nothing but protect this family's legacy." "Protect?" Poirot's eyebrow arched, his tone sharp. "Nan, monsieur, okay, you have plundered. The ledger I discovered in your study, hidden behind a false panel, most cleverly revealed your siphoning of Eleanor's inheritance. Debts, reckless investments, a crumbling empire. You needed her fortune to save yourself, but Eleanor's elopement with Monsieur Moreau threatened your plans, and so you acted." The room gasped, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Mies, Amos. The story is not yet complete. Lord Ashburn, you did not act alone. You hired a manna tug, a brute, to frighten Eleanor back to the manor." The scene at the coastal cottage, with its torn scarf and blood-stained handkerchief, was no accident. It was a performance, staged to terrify. The blood I discovered was not human, but animal. Clever ruse to mislead. You wished Eleanor to believe her life was in danger, to return to your control. Lord Ashburn sank back into his chair, his defiance crumbling. I only wanted her safe," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "Safe, monsieur, or subservient. Let us turn to another player in this drama, Madame Celeste." He pivoted to the enigmatic woman, whose smile faltered. "You, madame, knew of Eleanor's hideout in the abandoned chapel. She played the role of the mysterious stranger, dropping hints at the ball, guiding me to her sanctuary. But why? Was it love for your niece, or something more?" Celeste's eyes narrowed, her voice cool. "I protected Eleanor when no one else would. I had no part in this charade." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone skeptical. "Yet you kept your identity hidden, even from Eleanor. Your motives, they are not entirely pure. Tune of your brother's financial ruin, did you not? Not you stood to gain if Eleanor's fortune was secured or lost? A family secret, one you hinted at during our waltz, suggested Eleanor's lineage was not as it seemed. Her mother's affair, a scandal buried deep. It gave you leverage, did it not?" Celeste's handkerchief twisted in her hands, but she said nothing. Poirot pressed on. "And then there is Monsieur Moreau, the lover, the artist, the man who would risk all for Eleanor. Oh, monsieur, were no villain, yet you kept secrets. The cryptic note in your journal. The rendezvous at the cottage eat was you who planned the elopement, but you failed to protect her from the dangers that followed." Moreau's fists clenched. "I love her, Poirot. I'd never harm her." "I believe you," Poirot said, his voice softening. "Your heart is true, but love, it blinds. You did not see the web tightening around you both." Poirot turned to the room at large, his voice rising. "But the final piece of this puzzle is the most tragic. Albert Finch, the groundskeeper, whose jealousy drove him to blackmail. He discovered Eleanor's romance and sought to profit from it, demanding payment for his silence. His arrest in London was a victory, but it was only the beginning, for it was not Finch who orchestrated the greatest deception. He paused, letting the silence stretch, every eye fixed on him. The blood-stained handkerchief, the hired thug, the financial schemes all pointed to Lord Ashburn. But there is one detail that troubled me. The coded message in the cottage, the one Eleanor wrote in fear of betrayal. It was not addressed to her uncle, nor to Finch. It was addressed to someone closer, someone she trusted. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Poirot's eyes locked onto hers. "Oui, mademoiselle. You suspected someone, did you not? Someone who knew your plans, who could have betrayed you to your uncle. And I, Hercule Poirot, have deduced who?" He stepped forward, his voice a quiet thunder. "It was you, Madame Celeste. You played the double game. You helped Eleanor hide, yes, but you also informed Lord Ashburn of her plans. You fed him just enough to keep him in control, hoping to secure a share of the fortune for yourself. The chapel, the thug, was you who whispered the details, knowing it would force Eleanor back or secure her silence." Celeste's face drained of color. "That's absurd." "I love Eleanor. Love." Poirot's voice was sharp. "Or ambition. You knew Lord Ashburn's debts would ruin you both unless the fortune was secured. You played both sides, madame, and you nearly succeeded." The room erupted in murmurs, but Poirot raised a hand. "Silence, s'il vous plaît. The evidence is clear." The coded message, written in Eleanor's hand, used a cipher only you and she shared from childhood, cipher you taught her. No one else could have known it. And the thug, when questioned, described a woman matching your description, cloaked and secretive, who paid him to act. Celeste rose, her voice trembling. "You have no proof?" "Proof." Poirot smiled faintly. "It's the little gray cells. They do not lie. And the thug, he has confessed. Madame, your game is over." Lord Ashburn's voice broke the stunned silence. "Celeste, is this true?" She faltered, her composure cracking. I only wanted to protect the family. You were ruining us, Charles. I had to act." Lord Ashburn's shoulders slumped, defeat etched into his face. Poirot turned to Eleanor, who sat frozen, tears in her eyes. "Mamselle, you are free now. Your fortune is yours, and your love with Monsieur Moreau is no longer a secret. The law will deal with your uncle and aunt, but you must live for yourself." Eleanor nodded, her voice a whisper. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot stepped back, his work complete. "It's for my fee," he said, addressing the room. "I require none. Justice, it is payment enough. And love, mes amis, it is a mystery even I cannot solve, but one I am content to witness." He turned to leave, pausing at the door to glance at the starry sky beyond the manor's windows. The night was clear, the air crisp, and as he stepped into the cool evening, Poirot felt a warmth in his heart. The case was closed, the lovers reunited, and the truth laid bare. He adjusted his hat, a faint smile playing on his lips, and walked into the night, musing on the enduring enigma of the human heart.